Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live Guide and Grow event. If you guys don't know, we run these free events every month. Before I begin, though, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm from, the Darug people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, and culture of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in Australia. So, highly anticipated event. I'm super excited this month. We have a very special guest and dear friend of mine joining us. If you are new to the scene, if you want to join our events, they're live. We restream them as well. We record them. They're available on our Guide and Grow TV on YouTube. We stream across Facebook in our Facebook group, Montessori at Home, 0 to 3 years. Free platform. We support parents and caregivers on LinkedIn as well and on YouTube. So we're streaming across all our platforms and we have an amazing global community. So if you're out there and you're listening from anywhere in the world, let us know. We'll give you a shout out on the screen. Anytime during this live, you guys are welcome to ask questions. We'll pop them up on the screen and our amazing co-host today will be answering our questions. So today we are going to be talking about emotional intelligence and ADHD. And without further ado, I'm going to bring to the platform my dear friend and special guest, Stephanie Pinto today. Hi, Steph.
Hey, good morning.
Morning. I'm going to read a quick bio about you and then you can jump on and let people know a little bit more about you. So Stephanie has joined us before. This is her second time on our platform. She's a mother, best-selling author, ISEI certified social and emotional intelligence specialist, trained pediatric anxiety therapist, and practiced as a speech pathologist for 10 years. She supports parents and caregivers in learning how to manage emotions, frustrations, stress, so they can really create a calmer and connect more deeply with their kids. She's also the owner of Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids on Facebook, an amazing community that all of you can join as well. Welcome, Stephanie.
Woo, thank you for having me. What an intro.
Well, you deserve an intro like that. You're doing some amazing work in the emotional intelligence space, and I really want to dive into this topic with you. For anyone that's listening out there, send us a hi wave. Let us know where you're listening in from. If you are watching the replay, #replay, let us know again where to catch you. So, Stephanie, tell us all, how did you become involved in emotional intelligence and specifically your journey even with ADHD, because I know that that's something that we're going to cover in today's discussion.
Yes. So if you are a parent or a caregiver or even maybe a teacher, educator of young kids, older kids, like this stuff applies to teenagers, it applies to adults. We don't realize how, I think, impactful emotional intelligence is. So and especially if you have kids who are neurodivergent, maybe ADHD, ASD, then you're in the right place. So let me tell you a little bit about, I guess, the journey. As you mentioned, I was a speech pathologist for 10 years. And so working with kids and families and supporting them, particularly the last about 7 years, I worked at an organization here in Australia called Autism Spectrum Australia, also known as Aspect. So a lot of people, are familiar with that, especially if you have autistic children. So, and a lot of those children also had a diagnosis of ADHD. So I was sort of, surrounded by, the families that had those just different types of needs and different types of challenges to neurotypical kids, right? So I, of course, was doing my speech pathology work, and that was around language and communication and social skills. But I was realizing towards the end of, I guess, that career that a lot of parents that I was supporting were really struggling to know how to deal with their kids' big emotions and somewhat challenging behaviors. And I was like at a loss. I was like, this is really hard. Like, they're not doing what you want them to do. They're not cooperating, or they're melting down. And I was just not trained well enough to know how to deal with those kind of challenges and support parents. So long story short, I just discovered emotional intelligence online, as you do. There was someone in my circles who was posting about it, and I fell down the rabbit hole with looking into, what is this emotional intelligence? Weird. Like, literally one of the chapters in my book is the emotionally unintelligent girl, because that was me. It was like on my radar. And so, yeah, so I just kind of learned, I was learning a lot and reading a lot about how emotional intelligence was so powerful for adults in relationships, in the workplace. That's kind of
Mm,
where I discovered it. And then, I don't know, I just had this like light bulb moment where I was like, why aren't we doing this for kids now when they're young in homes, in schools, so that
mm,
they grow in this culture of emotional intelligence, of knowing my emotions, um, having an awareness of them and accepting them and knowing how to move through them, how to deal with them, rather
mm,
than really a lot of what I think a lot of us do is, I mean, as adults, we jump on social media or we jump into our work or we distract and we're like, it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal, or you know what, cut, the whole churn and burn, cut that person off. So we don't know how to really learn and listen and yeah, learn from our emotions. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we just naturally kind of teach or pass that on to our kids. We tell them to shove it down, to stop being so silly or ridiculous or
mm.
loud or whatever it is. So I sort of took that step to start bringing emotional intelligence into my world with my kids, my 2 kids, and my husband, and decided that I was, maybe I could actually teach parents this instead of, just the speech and language side of things. I can bring that in. So over time, I sort of developed my coaching practice and supporting parents, and it's grown from there. Like teachers want to hear about it, educators, people in
Yeah.
early childhood, preschool, school age, high schools. It's just, and yeah, the community online, the Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids one has just exploded. And it just says to me that, yep, people are ready to have a change and to see a change, and they want to learn, how do I do this? How do I not
Mm,
do a lot of what I was raised with, a lot of those kind of, I don't know, tactics or approaches, the very authoritarian, punitive ones, and how can I, support my kids with their
mm.
emotions and teach them? So big, big, big change, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think that a few things that you mentioned, like knowing that there is so much need out there for support for educators, parents, caregivers to do things differently because nobody ever taught us like how do we deal with it? How do we talk to kids? What do we say, when these big emotions are taking place? And there's this huge gap and nobody's ever taught that even as a professional when you go into whatever the medical field or we go into teaching with early childhood, there was nobody ever taught us like what do we say, how do we deal with it, like how can you send people out there working with kids and with no idea about how to help them and support them with emotional intelligence, dealing with their emotions, feelings, like you said, we always push them to the side, oh, it's okay, don't worry, you're fine. They're not
Mhm.
fine. They're not
Yeah.
fine and we're not fine. So we need to understand what we can do differently. And that's what I love about the work you do. So tell everyone, like, let's break down this word, emotional intelligence. What does
Mhm.
that mean? And what does that look like, particularly for younger children? So we've got people out here, I'm sure, that have children probably between 0 to 6. What does emotional intelligence mean?
Yeah, great question. So the immediate thing that always comes to mind when people say, what is emotional intelligence? I've heard about it or I've seen bits and pieces, but it's still a bit of a new term and concept for a lot of people. It was for me a few years ago. And can I just say, you are so right in that so many teachers and educators and therapists, I, as a speech pathologist, a pediatric speech pathologist, wasn't trained to
Mm,
connect with kids and to understand their emotions and their behavior. Like I remember running sessions where I would have my session plan worked out, whatever sounds we were trying to work on in terms of articulation or the grammatical concepts
yeah.
I was teaching. And I was like, we'll do this and this and this and this, and then you'll go home. Oh my God. Like we just had to, I somehow just learned sometimes your session plan goes out the window. But I didn't really
Yeah.
know why. We just had to be prepared. Oh my God. Like now I look back and I think, I'm so sorry to all those families I worked with because like now I would think, oh my gosh, I can see that you're not feeling it today, or something's up, or when kids are irritable or
Yeah.
grumpy or cranky or something's, I feel like a lot of it, particularly like as parents, sometimes we don't allow our kids, and the grace or the compassion to have a cranky, grumpy moment or day, whereas we have them all the time and we get snippy and snappy, and the kids around us just have to like deal with it because, well, I'm allowed to be anyway. So to go back to your question, the thing that comes, I guess, to mind with emotional intelligence, and it's very reductionistic, is just being smart with emotions. So I'm going to break that down, and I'll give you, I think, the wordy definition, because we can be smart with making decisions and things that we need to do during our day and plan our day. But to be smart with our emotions means to actually, and this is, I guess, I'm bringing the longer definition here, to be aware of our own emotions and those of other people in the moment, and to use that information to guide your actions, to make good decisions, and to adjust your behavior when you need to. So this is like in the moment. It can be really hard to do off the get-go if you've never been taught to. That first part is have an awareness of your own emotions. So, whoa, I'm feeling really frustrated at the moment, or I'm feeling really upset or disappointed, whatever that emotion is, to have an awareness of other people's emotions. So it could be the kids, could be my kids, could be the students or the children in my care or in the center. But to know, this is a bit of the the clincher. We don't realize that other people's emotions are just as true for them and just as real for them as ours are for us. We don't kind of validate, we don't really accept. We're like, as you said before, it was an accident, he didn't mean it, it's okay, up you get, you're fine. There's another one over there, just go take that one and you can share. Sometimes, like you said, our kids are not fine, but we kind of dismiss or invalidate, and we think, keep the peace, or it's not a big deal. So that's a big part of emotional intelligence. I need to have an awareness of my emotions because, oh my goodness, I am affecting or impacting the situation and the interaction. We can sometimes add fuel to the fire by, rather than
calm down.
So exactly. So we have to, I think, have that two-way awareness. My kids or the students in my center or whoever, they have emotions. I've got to be aware of them. I've got to understand that something's driving that. I might not know what, but I can look beneath the iceberg and have a bit of a poke around, and to do that in the moment. So that was like, that's a bit of those three key words is so powerful, because it's very, like, hindsight is 20/20, right?
Yeah.
We can be emotionally intelligent in hindsight and go, oh man, I wish I didn't lose it on my kids. Like, they were just being kids, or they just made a mess. Like, they're 6 or they're 2 or whatever. But to be able to do that in the moment and pull back from flipping our lid or erupting, like, that is really, it's really powerful. It's really difficult to begin with when we haven't practiced.
Yeah.
Like, I talk about this being a daily practice, even for me, and I write about it. I've written a book, I read, I learn, I teach, all things emotional intelligence, but I have to, it's a daily practice. It takes us to be disciplined, us, the adult, to be disciplined in our own emotional intelligence and emotional coping strategies before we can expect our little ones to do the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It all starts with ourselves, because we can't expect children to meet us where we're at, because they don't have the physical, mental capacity scientifically to do that. So we need to meet them where they're at. And to have those expectations that, my child's 5 and they need to deal with their emotions and all that. We know that that doesn't, the part of the brain that regulates all that doesn't fully develop until they're 26. Like, relax, everyone, Mia was asking if there'll be a replay. Yes, chaotic with bedtime. I love that with your 3 little ones. Definitely there will be a replay. We record all of our live events. You can jump onto our YouTube channel, Guide and Grow TV. All of the events are up there, or they're in our group, in our Facebook group, or on Guide and Grow. So just to answer that question, Mia, you can catch us after you've caught your 3 little ones and put them to bed. Okay, so let's talk about, maybe a little bit about how specifically we can apply emotional intelligence for neurodivergent children. So specifically with those that might need support with ADHD. So how does it differ? Does it differ? Does emotional intelligence differ when you're supporting children that are neurodivergent versus typically developing children, or is it something similar?
You know what? There's two parts to, well, we kind of touched on the two parts of emotional intelligence, my own awareness and then my own, I guess, self-management is what it's called. There's kind of some quadrants of emotional intelligence. So if we stick with those, my awareness and my ability to manage my emotions as a parent or an educator, that doesn't change. And that's actually where we need to start. One of the biggest quotes that came out of my book was, if we want to raise emotionally intelligent kids, we first must become emotionally intelligent parents or adults or educators. And so a big part of when I go out to centers or schools is to really focus a lot on, like, how are we going? What are we doing? What are we modeling? Do we have control of our own emotions? Are we able to regulate and things like that? So I want to say that that part doesn't change because it's still a practice. It's still, we need to be disciplined and mindful. Man, we need oodles of self-care as educators or parents anyway. So I think that's something that is like the focus, or that's at the forefront, right? Managing our own emotions. And we can go so far back and so far deep into why do I react the way that I react? Why is this so hard for me? And why do I tend to have these reactions? So there's a lot in there. But then the other part is, so I need to have an awareness of my kids or the child in my care, their emotions. So we still have to have that awareness. We have to know things like biomarkers, which are just kind of signals from the body that mean we can tell something's off. They're feeling some kind of emotion. They're not okay. They may be dysregulated. A big cue, one of the biggest, is actually tone of voice. And I know from my two kids, actually from myself as well, when I get emotional and something has upset me, my tone of voice will shift. It will go a bit higher. I see it in both my kids. I have one girl, one boy. And so I can see that. I can also see sometimes their body is moving less kind of, smooth and relaxed. Like they're a bit more, like, you know what I mean? Like jerky movements.
Yeah.
You can see they get a bit red in the cheeks. If my son is getting really upset or dysregulated, I'll see like tiny beads of sweat in his like eyebrows, and I'm like, oh, I can, you know when the child usually is getting emotionally charged, I want to say. So we have to have that awareness and be more attuned to it, I think, and that goes for either neurotypical or neurodivergent kids. And then the sort of last, I guess, quadrant, or the last portion, is I can't control my child's emotions, right? We can't do that. However, we can influence how they feel and how they behave based on what we do and what we say.
Yeah.
So remember, we talked about adding fuel to the fire. We can add fuel to the fire, or we can kind of pour water on it based on how well I manage my emotions. If my child spills cereal all over the carpet, for the third time or something, and they know to sit up at the breakfast bar, for example, I can either yell, I can get really frustrated, I can say, what is wrong with you? You know to sit up there, right? It's soaking into the carpet. Hurry up. Like, this is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. We can we'll raise our voice, look at my facial expression, my tone of voice, my body language is, it inflames the situation. And then I'm kind of creating this reaction in my child of, it's not fair, or I didn't mean it, or you're so mean to me, or you don't get it, or whatever they have that reactivity because of how I have, do you know what I mean? It's a bit like a flip-flop game. I don't know. So we can either add fuel to the fire, or we can kind of, diffuse the situation. Yes, something bad has happened, or, the milk on the cereal, it's soaking on the carpet, or my child's hit his sister, something like that. Yes, we need to address that. But 99% of the time, there is no immediate threat or danger. Like, unless you're on the road and your child's like, I'm going to run, and you do have to move fast. But a lot of time we kind of react in the moment. Whereas if we just pull ourselves back to pause and we talk about responding, not reacting, which is a huge difference, but also, again, takes practice to do. I'll tell you a quick story. My son spilt hot tea on my laptop probably 1-2 years ago, and it was just on the coffee table. It was a full cup of tea, and it spread across. Like, look, this is not the laptop. I had to get a new one. It spread across where the speaker is and the keys, and I was like, immediately, I was like, oh, there we go. But the thing is, because I have been practicing emotional intelligence, and it comes more naturally as we continue to learn about it, right? So a few years ago, I would have erupted and been like, "Go to your room! You ruined my laptop! Like, that's $2,000." But this time, I was like, I quickly upended, like, I put my laptop like this to like turn upside. I turned it off, and I said, "Arthur, quick, go and get the paper towel, go get some tissues or something." And so I like responded with speed, but without that emotional charge of like blaming him. Yes, it was his fault, but he didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. He knocked it with his elbow or something. But there's, the more that I can just see, the more that I'm responding to him like that, it's like they are big moments. It's not just a whoops, I've knocked, some cookie crumbs. It's like, this is a laptop. But really, and yes, it's a lot of money, and it's not like I have money coming out that I could just pay for it. But the point is, I value our relationship and connection, and that I'm teaching him, whoa, when something happens, work with me. Come on, we got to fix this out. You're not in trouble, and let's work on it together. And I think that's so much more important than, I guess, some of those other options where we add fuel to the fire and kind of blame and shame, things like that. So going back to, I guess, your question with neurodivergent kids, we know that ADHD kiddos struggle with managing those big emotions and maybe controlling them. There's that difficulty, even more so with emotional dysregulation. Also the lack of impulse control, which is so, like, that's hard. That's, as you mentioned, a still developing cognitive skill until the mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
So if we have a little one, a 2-year-old, a 6, even a 14-year-old, like, don't we know that a lot of teenagers make really dumb decisions? I did. And they do it because they want it, or they think it's okay, or they won't find out, or I'll just quickly get it. They don't have that ability to sort of switch on that think through the prefrontal cortex to sort of flick, put themselves into the future. If I do this, that person could find out, and what would mum say? And then, I get in trouble, or, that forward thinking, that kind of foresight, that takes a lot of connections in the brain that just aren't there yet. So with ADHD kiddos, and even with neurotypical, I think, where can we help them by meeting them where they're at? If they're struggling to deal with emotions, if they're blowing up, if they're melting down, if certain things trigger them and you think, but that's beyond a normal, reaction, well, that's where they're at right now. It doesn't mean they're going to be like that forever. An 8-year-old is not going to, grow into a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old with an 8-year-old brain. There's going to be growth and development there. We can certainly support and kind of shape and hone that, help it along. But I think if we meet our kids where they're at and know that there's always things under the iceberg, there's always something that's driving that reaction, or that blow up, or those hurtful words, or the refusal, and can we dial up our emotional intelligence to kind of respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively and think, what is going on here? No, that wasn't okay, or you can't use that language, or whatever it is, but how can I come in and approach the situation almost like I would, like, I think of a lot of this stuff as similar to, it's conflict resolution, or problem solving. It's the same as what we would do in a workplace with another adult. We would have boundaries, we would communicate with them, we would work together to find a solution. Yeah. Why can't we do that with our kids? Yes, at a more age appropriate or developmentally appropriate level, but that's very different, I guess, from us saying, I'm the adult, you're the child. You know what? No, you're not having any of that. Because you've acted like this, I'm going to take that off you. It's not productive. It's not respectful. it's not helpful or beneficial,
Mm.
and it's not emotionally intelligent. So we want to kind of teach our kids skills, of course, and we can do that with ADHD, with all brains. We just have to know in which different ways, what works for them, what works for me, what works for us together. Every family has a different dynamic. So I love
Yeah.
people like OTs, and because they're great at this. So
Yeah, they really are. And I think it's just really important to meet the child where they're at and observing what triggers, what is the trigger behind the behavior, or what kind of things are happening around that. A lot of people ask me, oh, well, this is happening like constantly during the day. It's like you need to really observe and keep a record of, okay, what are they feeling? What is the time? What's happened before and after? It's kind of like being your own investigator, so that you can really understand then what you can do to support that child, because each child is really unique and individual in the way they express their emotions, in the way they deal with them. It could start from 18 months. It could be something that they're still working on, like you said, at 6, 7, 8, 9. But the more that we can understand them, the more that we can understand how we can better support them. So I think that's a really key thing, like you mentioned,
and you did say, could I jump in, because
Yeah,
something came to mind just then?
yeah.
Looking beneath the iceberg and kind of being curious, and something dropped in for me. I don't know if anyone has heard of this little quote. It's be curious, not furious. So
Yeah.
just like you said, you've got to be a bit of a scientist, like an emotion scientist or a
Mm,
researcher, or that curiosity of what is driving that, or what's been
yeah.
happening this week, because my
Like
son.
changing the perspective. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. So that is so. Uh, if I can, I guess, get across and kind of for parents to have this takeaway of, sometimes we miss, understandably, right? We are busy. We haven't been taught this. We might
mm,
miss a lot of these kind of cues or clues with our kids. They might be being really, irritable or uncooperative or rude, or having more meltdowns than usual, whatever that is. And if we can think, what is different with this week, or something's up. He or she isn't usually like this. Or, this started when grandma went into hospital. Or
mm.
she's had her favorite teacher's been away all week. Or, you know what? We're getting some testing done for allergies, or I don't know,
Yeah,
bad
whatever.
night's sleep, constipation. Like, there are endless amounts of kind of, like, I want to say, reasons or contributing factors that bubble underneath a child's iceberg, and they
Yeah.
drive behavior. If you think about it, when you're coming down with a cold or a virus, even when you have an upset tummy, and you're not feeling well, or if something is going on with your significant other, and that's like sitting in the background for you, you are not as calm, regulated, flexible, patient, kind, and loving. You're not. You're like, there's stuff there. So I think if we can look at that, our kids have just the amount of the same, I guess, stresses that, as us. They might look different, but our kids experience that, and 1000% that will impact their emotional state, their physiological state, their ability to be flexible and adaptable or not. Like,
Mm.
we need
Mm.
to understand our kids are so layered and complex, and can we get out of the old, just because I said so, you do this, or I don't care, just get in the car, we don't have time. And can we start to, like we were saying, be a bit more curious?
Yeah, and I think, Stephanie, it's so easy for us to sit here and talk about it because we are conscious, or we understand child development, and we have that awareness of children and what's going on and stuff. But people who are new to the concept of, dealing with big emotions a different way, it can be really challenging to understand, like, this whole idea of doing things differently.
Mhm.
So all people that are listening out there, let's go practical and let's talk about some strategies, okay, that parents and caregivers can actually implement to help children, build emotional intelligence, and even if they are neurodivergent or typically developing. Because I feel like if we talk about some strategies, like, okay, this is what you can do, regardless if, they've heard of this term before, maybe
Yeah.
it's something that they can take away and be like, you know what, I'm gonna, respond to my child this way, or do this or do that. let's talk about some tips that you can
Yes.
offer people.
Ooh, okay, where to start? Okay, so get your notebooks out because I'm just gonna I'll dump a few ideas and
Yeah, let's do
strategies
it.
and things like that, and then see what works for you. Your child may not like one certain activity or idea, or you may think, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, or that wouldn't work for us. So take kind of what sits with you and what lands with you, and then throw away the rest. I don't know. So a few things off the get-go that are really easy, particularly for young kids. So, well, mine are 6 and 9, my 2 kids, and they still love, I'm just going to say it, reading books. Because I was a speech pathologist, I love books, and I know reading is so powerful. And actually, storytelling, just the art of storytelling, is a really powerful way to communicate and teach lessons.
Yes.
If I go to a workshop or a webinar, or if I'm doing a training, you better believe that I remember the stories that the expert or the facilitator is telling me about their business or their kids or whatever. I remember the stories because they hit home in an emotional place. I don't so much remember the tips and the like framework. So storytelling is a really great art, and this goes for obviously just reading books and things like that at bedtime or whenever you do. It doesn't actually have to be specific emotion books. I know there are tons out there wherever you live, even in there's like in $1 stores and like Kmart, Walmart, those kind of places. So, and then obviously Amazon. There are lots of wonderful emotion books dealing with emotions and things, but even just normal, whatever you've got at home, if you've got some storybooks, you can focus on, like, maybe read the story and then come back, or leave the story and go, you know what, remember when, if you've read it a few times, remember when Jake fell off his bike and then Sandy came over and just, laughed or something. How is he feeling? Or would you ever do that? Or has that ever happened to you? And I wonder why she does that. How would that feel? So there's a lot of emotion coaching and teaching that can be done in books, even if it's not an emotion focused story.
Yeah.
But I think also if we shift to as I was talking about the art of storytelling, I tell my kids, I have to like drag out these memories, because I think, oh my God, my son, we stopped off somewhere one day quickly to use the bathroom at a little business that we'd never go. I was like, just go in and ask to use the bathroom really quick. And when he ran in, they told him where to go, and he went to kind of the wrong door and then had to go back. And he said, they all laughed at me, and he was coming out crying. He was like, I'm never going in there again. I don't even know if he went to the toilet. Like, do you still need to go? And I had to dial up my emotional intelligence, because maybe in the past I would have said, you know what, they were probably laughing at something else. Like, don't be silly. It's kids laugh. Don't, why are you making such a big deal? And I was like, wow, that's really hard. How I bet you felt embarrassed, and they shouldn't have laughed at you. And I told him a story of a time that something similar, not the same, but when I felt that emotion and how it really landed with me, and how it was yucky, and what I did about it. So it doesn't have to be, you might think, well, I've never done exactly what my child has done. You might not, but you will have experienced the same emotion and feeling. It could be disappointment, it could be embarrassment, shame, anger, anxiety, fear. So we've all experienced those emotions. We just haven't experienced them maybe in the same way as our kids, right? Yeah. So that stuff, I want to kind of drop a disclaimer here. I didn't say it like right at that moment, because man, when emotions run high, that logic, that rational thinking part of the brain is offline. He would not have heard any message I had to say. He would have been like, I don't care. I'm never going there. You're making that up. Or like, I would have a big fat no. So I waited and I just allowed him to sort of let that out, express it without shutting it down or invalidating it. And then I told a little while later, it might have been like tucking at bedtime. I don't know for anyone else. Is that a good time when you feel like your kids are a bit more connected with you? They're a bit more open. They're obviously, well, not in the crazy pre-bedtime stage, but like going to bed, doing the tuck in. My kids are more calm. They're a bit tired. They're quite regulated. And that's when we have our amazing conversations, and they'll open up, or they'll ask me something, or they'll hear something that at another time they would not have been able to hear. Yeah. So all of these things, they sound like very I mean, they're everyday kind of things that we do, but they're actually almost like emotional intelligence building exercises. And another thing is, I think, really in modeling and helping our kids to grow their emotional vocabulary. So a lot of us as adults, even, we have a handful of emotion words in our vocabulary. I'm good, I'm fine, I'm busy, I'm stressed. Some of those are not even emotion words. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. You know what I mean? There's well over 100 emotion words. Even if I've got some resources on my website, emotion wheels. There'll be stuff that you can just Google online, the emotion wheel. I have a kids one, which is it's beautifully colored, but simplistic emotion wheel. There are adult ones that have lots and lots of words, and it's not that you're going to sit down with your child and say, we need to learn anxious today or disheartened or not doing that. But I find that even having that on my fridge, there was a big period where particularly my youngest something would have upset her with her brother, and she would go over to it and she would say, I want to tell you how I'm feeling. And she would point to like five of them. And I'm like, I think you're really, so it can prompt conversations about what happened today, how you're feeling. Has dad or mum ever felt like that? What would you do if a friend felt like this?
Yeah.
So we're just kind of getting those wires connecting in the brain, and we're teaching. And it can just be out and about in the car when you're watching TV. You're modeling and you're talking about how the characters are feeling and things like that. To us, it can feel like awkward or weird, but it doesn't to our kids. Our kids just accept and absorb.
They do.
Yeah, and if it's a moment of connection where you're sitting together on the couch watching something, brilliant. They love that. So I want to say, like, I had to do this. Get over if it feels weird or awkward, because the more you do it, the more it becomes your culture. As in, we just do this. This is what we do. We talk about it. We talk about it at dinner, or we talk about it tuck in, or on the way to school. So there are there's lots of other things we can do, but they're
No, I
simple.
think that's a really great place to start. And Mia was saying that she just added a feelings wheel to my fridge last week. Yeah, I love that. Having calming corners and places where children can go and you can talk about emotions and stuff. It's really important to be having these conversations, like you're saying, Stephanie, like opening that dialogue, having that vocabulary in your household, making it a normal thing to accept feelings, like number one thing that people can do. Colleen was asking, is there a good book? Yes, Stephanie, pull out your book from behind you. So if you want to dig deeper as a parent or a caregiver or anyone about emotional intelligence, from chaos to connection, we will pop the links all in the chats for you guys. It's available on our Amazon store. It's a fantastic book. Stephanie's gone into detail about everything. So if you are looking for it, that's where to go. Okay, so talking about modeling, having that emotional intelligence vocabulary in your house, storytelling is a great way for younger children, to really do that. And you're doing that outside of the periods where your children are experiencing these massive, big emotions, right? Because we know that when children are struggling in that moment, it's like I love this quote. When a child is drowning, it's not the time to teach them a swimming lesson. I love it because it's true. Like when they're drowning in big emotions, that's not the time to be giving them a lecture or advising them on what they should be doing. So on that topic, what would you advise to parents and caregivers when the kids are going through these big emotions right then and there? We know not to react. Okay, that's number one. Right? Holding ourselves. What can we do to support them in those moments? And then maybe touch on, children that are neurodiverse or struggling with ADHD. Is there something particularly with them that we do differently? What do we do?
Okay. Oh, brilliant. So you just mentioned one of the things. Can we keep ourselves calm to, human, as much as humanly possible? Because it can be difficult to keep calm. Can we keep ourselves calm when there are big emotions flying around? We have these things called mirror neurons in our brain that pick up and sense emotional expression, emotional state, and physiological state in another. It's why I might cry when I watch a sad movie, or why we can get angry when our kids are angry. It's actually called emotional contagion. So we can, and this has been proven in research studies, where there is, a certain group of people feeling a certain way, not even necessarily outwardly expressing, I am so mad. And that is contagious. That flows on to other people who are in the immediate surroundings. So we kind of know we're fighting a little bit of what our brain is doing for us, right? Because that's a protective, it's a primitive kind of part of our mechanism of our brain. But what we do know now, thank goodness to the last 20 years of neuroscience and research, that our parents didn't have. So this is a big thing. We are moving away from, oh, that's, I don't want to just do what my parents did or what was how I was raised. I want to make some changes. And I think we need to do that now, because now we have the knowledge and the information. I think we need to step up our game. I want to say, well, Maya Angelou says once we learn better, we do better.
Yeah.
So yeah, just really evolving our practices, which means knowing a little bit of the neuroscience, so that in the heat of the moment, we know, we talked about when emotions run high, that logical, rational thinking part of our brain essentially switches off. It goes offline. So if our child is melting down, as you said, that is not the time to teach a lesson, to even tell them to take deep breaths, or to remind them of the boundary. Like, we don't hit, hands are not for hitting. That's not going in, right? There are so many changes physiologically that happen when we are emotionally hijacked, which is the term, emotionally charged. One of them is that our inner ear switches. There are some changes, and we do not hear these more natural, like the speaking higher frequency sounds. We actually start to hear the low frequency, which is the predatory sounds, because in caveman days, we had to, when we were in fight or flight, we had to hear those, what was going on. So not to, if we can understand a little bit about, okay, now's not the time to talk so much. It's not the time to reason with my child. Or to even maybe sometimes use a bribe, like, come on, if you just get in the car, I'll give you a lolly, or whatever it is. It's definitely not the time to threaten or to punish, because our kids are doing the best they can with the brain that they have. I want to say it's not a very good one. Well, it's underdeveloped, right? So we want to acknowledge that they're doing the best they can, and not to punish them for it, right? For having an under construction brain. And if we can understand that. And so then what are we left with? Well, so I'm not going to talk to my child during meltdown. I'm not going to reason with them. I have to keep myself, like, what can I do with them to help? Then the word that comes to mind is co-regulate or co-regulation. And so I've written about this, as lots of other sort of, I guess, specialists in the child development and psychology space have. Co-regulation means, can I share my calm and my regulated nervous system state? Can I share that with the child in front of me? And can I use my relationship with them, the trust, the love? Can I use my body language, my facial expression, my open posture, like all of these things that say to that child, oh man, you're having a tough time. It's okay. How you're feeling is it's okay. It's normal. I've got you. Like, I'm here with you. I'm not going to leave. You're not going to frighten me off. I'm not going to punish you for this. Like, let's get through it together. And so even that is like, it's diffusing. It's co-regulating, which is, lending our calm and our regulated state in order to regulate a dysregulated child.
Yeah.
So we know that works, that there's research behind what happens in the nervous system, because our nervous system, like, we run on electricity, right? Our heartbeat, our brain activity, it's electrical activity. So we can influence that, and we can see that works. It doesn't work so well if we're not 100% calm and regulated, which as parents, it's really hard to be 100% unless you're a saint. But we can, sometimes it's about telling ourselves some of these mantras, like, my child is doing the best that they can. There is no emergency here. As much as I can keep calm, that's going to help the situation. Myself taking deep breaths. I just instinctively put my hand on my heart, because I can feel my heart. I'm connecting and kind of grounding, going, whoa, look at that sweaty, reddened face. Like, they're yelling, he's so mad, or, he really wants that cookie, or whatever it is. So a big part of, I think, co-regulating with our kids is, yes, dialing up our inner kind of emotional intelligence and seeing what's really going on, not what we think is going on. My child's just turning this up so that they get that thing they want. They're having a hard time. They've lost all control. Their brain is offline. And if we can keep them safe, like physically, if we need to, but can we just kind of float our boat through the storm with theirs and say, we're going to ride this out together. No, you can't have that thing. I know you really want it. I'm here. Sometimes it's not saying so much. I'll say a bit with my kids, but not like, you don't want to be, standing like a cold-hearted, well, suit yourself. When you're done, tell me. But I think it's about honoring and accepting how they're feeling. It's awful. It's really stressful in those meltdown moments. We don't want to make them feel judged or shamed or, you're being such a baby, or, how about I tell your friends how ridiculous you're being right now. Your brother doesn't act like this. Like, we don't want to go there because, again, that's adding fuel to the fire. But we want to just hold that space, like the emotional space, but the physical space for them to like ride out. Imagine like a bell curve, it kind of, or a wave. It builds, it might crescendo and explode, and inevitably it always will pass. I know sometimes it's much longer than sometimes it feels so draining and it goes on forever. Maybe especially with our neurodivergent kids, they can have those extended. They can just be caught in that emotion for longer, and it's really tough on us, but also on them. So I think that concept of compassionately holding space and riding out, like, again, it's parents often say to me, but like, what do I do? Like, I need to do something. I'm like, emotions need to run their course. If we think about the word emotions, they're energy in motion, emotions. So that we can, you guys have all seen your kids, right? When they're like, the energy is brewing inside them and it's coursing through their veins and they're like, and they're really going to explode. We can't just put a lid on that. We shouldn't put a lid on that and send them to their room to deal with it, or threaten that, if you keep going like this, then say goodbye to the iPad tonight. That's just teaching them to control, to hold in, to suppress. And we know that's really, that's really dangerous in the long term, right? So holding space and allowing our kids to not have it all together. They're not always going to be a 5-year-old and have a 5-year-old reaction, right? And there's oodles of time later to talk about, as you said, what happened, what went on, and how can we do things differently, not in the heat of the moment, because you won't get anything productive happening then.
Yeah, absolutely. And as long as you're keeping yourself and the child safe, because the thing is that when children are going through these big emotions, there can be safety issues. They could be hitting you. It's so easy to say, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep calm now. And, yes, I know they're struggling, but they're physically hitting you or throwing things, across the room. Sometimes it can escalate quite quickly with children who really struggle with dealing with those emotions. So I think it's really important to make sure that as you are co-regulating and doing all those things that you said, that you're keeping everybody safe in that equation as well. And if that means, physically having to move yourself, or, keeping that child safe, like that's something, wouldn't you agree, that is important to do?
Yeah. We've got to keep ourselves safe. We're allowed to have our own boundaries as parents or adults, right? So we don't have to just, accept. I often talk about there's a big difference between accepting all emotions and accepting all behavior. We cannot, that's a disservice to the child and to probably the siblings and the people around them, their friends, if we're allowing them to hit and kick and things like that. So we can move away, we can move back, we can have a pillow, we can, be creative with what do you need to do? How can you protect yourself, and let them know that that's not okay, without, like I said, kind of shaming or blaming or adding fuel to the fire, and most of the time kids are, when they're calm and regulated and that things have cooled down, most of the time kids know what's right and wrong. They know hitting is wrong. They know they shouldn't have done that.
They
But
feel
in
bad.
the moment, they could not stop themselves. We don't do it as adults because we have a lot more life experience and brain development and things like that. We don't hit and kick and things, but we still lash out verbally. We still can't, like, it's bloody hard for a lot of us to not say, what'd you do that for? Oh my God, are you serious? Like, we lash out. It's in a different way, but how hard is it? Can we just acknowledge that that's really hard for our impulse control to always manage? And we're asking a 2 or a 5 or a 10-year-old to never erupt and lose that impulse control or that emotional regulation. I'm like, come on, guys. Like,
I love it. We have a comment from Facebook. I needed this. Do you save this video so I rewatch a whole life? Yes, absolutely. The video is saved. It's in our Montessori at Home 0 to 3 years Facebook group. It's on our Guide and Grow Facebook page. It's on our YouTube channel, Guide and Grow TV. All of the live sessions are recorded. You guys can watch the replay from the beginning in your own time when your kids are asleep and you've got a little bit of time for self-care. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. Let everyone know, where can they find more information? Tell us about your book, where they can access. If people want to learn more about emotional intelligence, where can they go?
Okay, so I guess two of the best places to find me, and this is where I put a lot of my content out, is on my Facebook community called Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids, and on my Instagram, which is emotionally.intelligent.parent. So you can find me on those two places. My website is just stephaniepinto.com, so nice and easy to remember. There's a free course on there. There's a couple of other small courses that you can do and things like that. And the book, I was holding this one up before. It's got the big black. This is my very first author copy. So I keep it on my desk, which is why it has that on it. But yeah, this is From Chaos to Connection. And that's how parenting with emotional intelligence raises kind, confident, resilient kids. So it's all about, how can we parent with emotional intelligence? How can we become more emotionally intelligent in order to teach this and pass it on to our kids? So that's on Amazon, as you said, wherever your Amazon is.
Yeah, we'll pop all the links so everyone can find you into the chat on all of our platforms. I just want to say thank you so much. This is such an important topic. Emotional intelligence is something that, every single family and educator and everyone needs in their life. So I thank you so much for your time today, for coming on our platform and chatting about it. I can't wait to chat again. We always have these amazing in-depth conversations about how we can help support children to raise our future generations that are, really kind and compassionate and mindful and have that emotional intelligence that we might not have experienced as a child. So thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone out there that was listening, if you've got any questions, if you're watching a replay, let us know, pop them in the chat. We will get back to you 100%. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Sylvia. Bye guys.
Until next